Adam, welcome to the pod.
Thank you.
So before we get started, let me read your bio. Adam Silberstein is a YPO certified forum facilitator and executive coach who discovered the power of forum at 19 and was mentored into the discipline by one of YPO's most respected facilitators, Jim Warner. After building financial freedom in real estate and finance, he followed a clear calling into YPO and EO forum facilitation and CEO coaching, becoming one of the youngest facilitators in the ecosystem and a trusted advisor to thousands of executives, teams, and families. Today, his work centers on one-on-one coaching, forum retreats, leadership offsites, and custom experiences, grounded in a deep belief that pure wisdom and shared reflection are a powerful advantage for high performers. Adam, welcome once again.
Thank you.
So you don't look as young as your bio says. How long have you been doing this?
Well, I started at 26. I think the bio was more about, at the time, was one of the youngest people doing it. But yeah, now there's plenty of gray hair in the beard. I'm 42 now.
So that means you've been doing it for almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So from the age of 19, when you first experienced forum till now, what are some of the ways you think you've improved as a facilitator?
Wow. Well, I think, you hit the 10,000 hours thing, right? So um, I know I have a sense of confidence that I can step in just about any room, deal with any, whether it's level of ego or dysfunction or objectives that a group has, whether it's within a family, whether it's in a forum, whether it's a leadership team, if it's, and depending on the different culture, right? So working with people in Bible Belt South from Northern California to New York, it's having the confidence to be able to step in a room and create the value that the group most wants. And so, I think there's a lot of things that go into that. Happy to unpack on that. But I think ultimately, I remember 26, 27, just so much time spent preparing and, the amount of emails and the amount of feedback that I produced and the hours that I spent on it, knowing nobody's really spending time on reading or going through that. And so now I feel like I can provide even more value, really just stepping into the room and knowing how to guide a group. And I think that happened yesterday. A colleague of mine was in a session and, he was like, you can just tell the 10,000 hour mark, you knew exactly what needed to happen. You kind of walked in there like, hey, what should we do kind of thing, and produced immense value. So I think that's one of the biggest things, is just feeling a level of mastery in the art of facilitation.
So when you say you discover the value, how do you go about finding the value of the group needs? Is that in pre-work? Is that also in room? Tell us a little more about that.
It depends on the group, right? So we're talking about YPO forum. I think most facilitators have that process of, let me have an initial call with, whoever the biggest stakeholders are, let's say like the moderator, open-ended questionnaires, kind of understanding the different dynamics of what's going on in each person's life, and then also taking a temperature of the health of the forum. Um, I think like within YPO, even though there's a ton of uniqueness and a diversity perspective, I think we all can understand, we see the same like 10 to 12 issues, right? So typically there's no new issues, and I have a playbook on how to surface, work through, create value with each of those, let's call it typical issues, right? Um, and I think the other thing is to remember, so, whether I'm working as a coach, when I'm working as a facilitator, when I'm working with leadership team, I think the important thing is to remember, like, what is my role, right? Am I stepping in as a consultant? Am I stepping as a facilitator or coach, right? I believe that all leaders, part of leadership development, part of learning how to be a 10 out of 10 forum member is embracing facilitation skills and coaching skills. So one of the things that I'm lucky is that the people who are in these sessions are trying to learn more and more about what I do, right? So ultimately, I get to step in as a facilitator. I don't need to know all of the answers. My job is just to facilitate, surface, align, and that means I don't need to be an expert in the actual topic or the themes. A lot of times the companies that I'm working with, I may not even fully understand what they do. right? But still can provide them value. So I think it's really owning my space, understanding that my job is to facilitate, not necessarily consult at times. Um, and hope that answered the question.
Certainly, it certainly did. You mentioned some of the issues, the 10 to 12 issues that are usually happening within a room, a forum, or mostly forums. So let's
Yeah.
start with that. What are some of those issues that most often come up?
From Forum Health, I mean, misalignment, are we getting the value? From Forum, it's like, there's no continuity and accountability. So it feels like we come in there and it's like, hey, moderator, what are we doing today?
Yeah.
Right. So really, how do we set up a forum for the year and making sure they feel like a sense of value? There's an operational level to the forum, right? Are we prioritizing? Are we getting things done? Are we holding each other accountable? Are we challenging one another? And looking at end of the year and say, okay, well, we've made some progress. You can tell the forum's created some value. Um, so I think that's from the forum health side. Of course, you have like dominating members and ego and things like that, that are kind of the typical things. And there's just a lot of conflict resolution there. But I think ultimately it's not about conflict resolution. It's about seeing all friction as opportunities to lead to creativity, right? And I think my job as a facilitator, frankly, is to take all friction, which is just energy, and how do we transmute that into creative energy, right? My biggest concern is whether it's groups or leadership teams is when there's no friction. That means there's probably artificial harmony. And so part of my job is to create a safe space, surface where we need to have some productive storming and norming, and then really tap into creativity. And I find that that's vital in forums. And if we do that, then the forum can, if we teach them that process, that tool, that machine of being able to do that, they can get through anything. You also have the other themes, I think, like what's next, right? So in YPO, obviously, you have a high level of achievement. I've achieved certain things. What's next for me? How do I still create meaning? There's the whole how do you empower and raise kids in an affluent world? There's dealing with aging parents. So there's relationship dynamics. So those same, I don't know. And those are five right there that we probably hear just about on every retreat.
Sure. And you mentioned that this is a calling for you. Um, you're obviously in a different position, having been in a different industry and having uh, some freedom, as you mentioned in your biography. Um, when did you really realize it was a calling? Was it between the age of 19 and 26 when you were first exposed to form, or was it afterwards? And what exactly called you to it?
So, it was interesting. I remember the moment. I was on a retreat with Jim Warner. This is the second retreat I've ever been on with him. The first one was 19. The second one, it must have been 25, something like that. And he was launching us into my second forum. So it was a different forum. His son, Paul Warner, wanted to bring together another group of people. And I decided to join. It was at Loveland, Colorado. And I remember I had all of these deals and aspiration and ideas of how I wanted to do this in my life and that in my life. And Jim really just challenged me, and it sounds like, I get it. Anything worth doing is worth overdoing. And I was like, I'm very much an overdoer at that point. And he really challenged me. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And at some point it kind of hit me. I was like, I actually want to do exactly what you do. And he goes, great, tell me more about that. I'm like, well, I really see the flexibility. I see how, doing this work and putting yourself out there keeps you accountable to doing your own work, right? So I think I believe in self-integrity. I never put myself in an ivory tower. One of the things I love about the calling is I get paid to put myself in a position with people I consider mentors. They're paying me to provide value to them. So I'm sitting there effectively getting paid for learning a ton and creating a lot of value at the same time. So to me, I feel like most of the time I feel in pinch me type dynamics. Like, wow, my office is, I just got a call from, hey, can you join me to lead a retreat on a yacht in Tortola? Love these guys. Of course, I'd fly down for, a day or two and help them. And they treat me great. They love the value that I provide. I learn a ton from them. And so my office gets to be these incredible places with incredible people. And to me, there's a lot of energy there. In addition to that, I think at 25, 26, when I felt a little bit jaded from finance, real estate, wasn't loving the family office I was working with. And I felt like really there's a little bit of a spiritual awakening that was happening at
Yeah.
25, 26. I never really thought about before. I went to Israel. I had, a mentor of mine who's still a close spiritual teacher who you spoke with recently. Um, I met him and he awakened some spiritual energy in me, and I started thinking about um, what is my calling and how do I want to give back and how can I impact the world? And when I knew this world existed, I thought, wow, if I can be a facilitator, a force for good amongst people who have large influence, then there's a big ripple effect there, right? There's leverage there. So that also, um, gave me a lot of energy. And as I look back and seeing all of the value that I know I've been able to create and the ripple effect from it feels very meaningful to me.
You mentioned you have a playbook. I'm curious to hear a little more about that. What are some of the unique things that Adam brings to form in terms of tools?
So what I'm finding lately that I think there's two things that, and this is simple, it's not rocket science, but I think there's two things that I find myself saying over and over to forums and maybe the value that they're looking for. I have found in the last 6 to 8 years, with the growth from YPO, just maybe the attention span of the way the world is. I think there's been a lot of let's call them like misfires or failure to launch forums. So there's a lot of forums out there that have been struggling over the last 3, 4 years, call them COVID forums. And so have a bit of a playbook on what I think is the best practice to launch. Happy to get into that. But, I think one of the key things of that is we all know, like we get to know each other's personal history. We should get to know what's going on in each other's lives. We should probably get to know each other's businesses. But one of the things that I feel or notice or observe that forum does not do a great job of onboarding is where's this person going? What's their vision? What are their values? How do they want to be held accountable to their principles? And I find it almost impossible to be a functional forum if we don't know how whatever presentation or whatever it is you're working on leads to your overall vision or goal, right? And I find forums ask me all the time, or people in organizations ask me, how do you challenge people without insulting them? And ultimately, it's in the context of their own desires and their own vision and their own principles. So, hey, Don, you said you want X. How does this get you closer to that? Right. And so just onboarding that vision principle, I find works really well. And definitely, I think, should be a part of the onboarding process. I think EO does a great job of this, where they say meeting one should be personal history, meeting two should be business. And right. So having the discipline, just like in an organization, to not just jump right into it, to have a specific onboarding strategy. And then by meeting 4 or 5, we're where we need to be and we can launch from there. I think it's sad that so many people are 3 years into their forum experience and still trying to figure out all the rave.
So I really want to double click on the tools you use. Can you mention a framework or two that you use that you think is unique to you? Um, and how does it like what are the details of one of your tools?
Yeah. So I think as part of that, YPO is full of operators. I find Forum has very little operational leverage, let's call it, or velocity, right? Like I said, show up, hey, moderator, what do you have for us today, right? That is most of the energy. Just most people are glad that they showed up on time, right? And so a lot of people out there familiar with EOS, Entrepreneur's Operating System. I love these different operating systems, don't care which one, Bloom Growth, EOS, scaling up, whatever, right? I think they're great. And it just teaches some sort of discipline and operational dynamics. Um, and I think there needs to be something like that in Forum. And so I kind of joke around that there's an FOS, right? And so what if, and what's cool about onboarding this is that we can create real experiential, open, transparent experiences developing this. And I believe just like a strategic planning event with your team, a retreat should be about setting up the year. So we can have a great, open, honest, transparent year on your forum retreat, setting you up for the year. But then the meetings, I hope, should have a little bit of execution energy. Almost like in EOS, you have weekly meetings. In forum, you have monthly meetings. And my hope is that those monthly meetings are creating some group accountability to your top priorities and to your principles. So very simply stated, at every retreat, I have everybody come away with their 2 growth areas for the year. and
Mm.
I update people's update forms and say, what if one of the questions on the update form says, um, reflecting on your top 2 priorities, how have you made progress in the last 30 days? Very simple, not rocket science, right? But it keeps you accountable. What you said, your top 2 areas of growth, not your top 2 priorities, your top 2 areas of growth for the year. Um, Number two, I believe shifting things into a principle based thinking versus just either goal oriented or right wrong thinking. So, to unpack that a bit, you typically, when forums go into presentations, I think the YPO mindset, the operator, the executive mindset is let's find the right answer, right? And we're a good, valuable group if we give this person the right answer. Now, I think we're all understanding that there's a wisdom in knowing there is no right answer. And our job as a forum, as an executive team, is to find the answer that most upholds either our values, our principles, our goals, etc. Right. And so ultimately, I believe forums should be integrating each other's guiding principles in presentations. And so on retreats, I'm a big fan of surfacing people's guiding principles. And these aren't just like integrity, honesty. These are ones that if you look at, you're like, I hope people say this about me at my funeral, right? And so ultimately, what if that second question, first question is, what are your top 2 areas of growth and how have you made progress in the last 30 days, right? The second question is reflecting on the guiding principles that we created at the retreat. Which have you been neglecting the last 30 days and which have you been upholding well, right? Ultimately, at the end of the year, the reason why I call this an operating system is that we can look, hey, there's 8 people in the group, there are 16 growth areas. Yes or no, did we check them off, right? Yes or no, do we feel more in integrity with our principles now than we did a year ago? Ultimately, if the answer is yes to that, and the group says, wow, like we made a lot of progress here, then it feels like there's some operational leverage or velocity in the group. And then we feel really good about that. And I'm getting a lot of groups saying, hey, can we just reset for the next year? Right. And so there's, again, bringing that concept, very simple concept of like EOS, bringing it to forum, but while still maintaining the holistic nature, psychological safety of a forum.
I completely agree with you that forum lacks accountability. So I'm glad you're focused on that. How does the one-on-one coaching inform your facilitation? Assuming that whether it's a client that first hires you for one-on-one and then brings you facilitation, or whether it's just one-on-one clients.
Yeah. So it's interesting because everything I just said, I can do on a one-on-one basis, right? So the way
Mm.
that I find your top 2 growth areas as a coach, I probably should onboard that pretty early on. The way that I do, like taking stock of what's going on in people's lives, understanding their personal history, surfacing their guiding principles, all of that are part of my onboarding process for coaching, right? And so basically, I think I've married the 2 of them where it just becomes group coaching on the retreat, right? And what happens a lot of times, people call me after and say, "Hey, I want to do one-on-one work." Great, you've already checked off the first couple of boxes because you're on a retreat with me, right? So it's like a perfect segue into coaching. Now, I think I told you this before. Typically, clients come in for one-on-one in like 3 different areas. One, there's something really wrong. I call it the building is on fire. We need to run in. We need to help them. Right? There's something big going on, and just needs somebody to support them, listen to them, be a sounding board, navigating a difficult dynamic. Whether it's I don't know, company going over under a divorce, you're partnered with your wife and you're going through a divorce and trying to run the company, right? So there's all kinds of stuff that's like, wow, I need help right now. There's the well care, which is, hey, everything's great. I need a coach to come in and help me, challenge me, and push. And I call that a well care relationship. And then there's transitions. I get a lot of clients who are transitioning from one professional CEO job to another, or maybe transitioning out of their hard charging CEO life, if you will. Maybe had a big exit, maybe doesn't want to do it anymore. And how do we transition not to retirement, but to another meaningful chapter in their lives? And so obviously there's different tools and different processes for each of them, but you can also see how all 3 of those could inform tools, exercises for group coaching on retreat.
Awesome. So I want to move into the space um, of the meeting. What are some things you look for in the space that support your work?
It's in a forum meeting or?
Yeah, the physical space in a
Oh,
group dynamic.
so they're like the physical venue.
Mm.
Cool. People ask me what is like my favorite place to go on retreat. I
You
always
haven't been
say,
to a Summer Boise yet, so that can be your favorite once
where?
you visit my retreat facility.
In Boise, right?
Yeah.
Well, I was gonna say the mountains, outside. I haven't been there yet, but I'm not sure if there's some mountains around or some woods around.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I
It's
imagine
200 miles of trails around the
bingo.
facility.
I find that there's this tendency to think that we have to sit around a boardroom or sit around even in on sofas and just be in a circle for 2 days. I have actually found that on the go, whether it's skiing, chairlift talk, whether it's, two people, grab a partner, 45-minute hike. I want each of you to talk about this. Go, create time for both of you. We're going to stop at the top of that trail. We're going to have a little powwow as a group, and then we're going to change up. Those are some of the best sessions, right? And just a little bit of light facilitation. And groups really appreciate that, right? Like, why did we fly all the way to so and so, and then we're sat in a room all day long, right? That's one of the
Mm.
biggest challenges I hear. So I think as a YPO facilitator specifically, it is my job to be creative to say, how can I create the value at the same time, integrate and use the land around me, the magic of the land, right? So one of my favorites is Colorado, doing, a hike up to an alpine lake and maybe do a little session by it, jump in, do a cold plunge, and then maybe a little session afterwards. Those are the best, right? But obviously, I live in South Florida. Um, a vast majority of groups don't have access to that all the time. But yeah, if we can integrate something that feels different than the day to day, that feels like a non-execution energy, I find one of the things I say is that my hope and forum is we have like kind of a sitting back in your chair energy versus a sitting on the edge of your chair. I think most people are in the sitting edge of your chair mentality most of the time. And so, how do we sit back, ponder, create space? And if we can integrate nature, even better.
So let's jump into the brass tacks. How do you figure out what to charge, and what are the general fees for you? Given your experience, I imagine they're slightly um, more, they're higher than perhaps junior facilitators. What are some expectations around price, and how do you set those from the onset?
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I have my numbers and I'll share them. It's a challenging thing, right? Because how do you work with a clientele where they're flying on three different private jets? They're flying in really for you to provide value, and you're the cheapest thing on the expense item. And I know that's not everybody, but luckily, I have that's who I work with on a typical basis. So I try to be very fair, I believe, and but also understand the value that I provide, right? Um, so you know, I think it has to do with relationships. What was my price that I gave them last year, knowing there should be some sort of increase. Um, Also try to honor what like typical rates are out there, right? So, I do have kind of like a model of like a consultant where I look at what do I want on an hourly basis and then estimate what that would be and then offer
Mm.
like a project basis. For forum, it's much easier, right? So it's like 7 grand a day for forum. If it's local and I don't have to fly, it's 6,500. This is 2026, so this could change and move, right? In a couple of years from now. But I think that's pretty fair. And I know I create that value, especially when you look at most groups um, get stipends from their chapters, or you think about it on a per out of cost person. So I feel very confident about the value there. And I know other parts of the world charge different amounts. From corporate, it's obviously higher, but there's more work, right? So there's one-on-one individual interviews, et cetera. On a coaching basis, typically I just kind of charge 13,000 a quarter. Typically that's about a call a week, but inevitably people miss. I am not the kind of person that says use it or lose it. I don't love that energy. It's like, hey, if you balled a quarter, it's effectively 13 calls, and if it takes 2 quarters to get there, whatever, that's fine. I travel, they travel, it's fine, and that ends up working for my clients. Breaks down to about 1,000 an hour, and then corporate. I think a day, day and a half. Usually, I don't really recommend 2 day facilitations. It's like almost too much. I want them to either go do some strategy work or get jump in deep or go have fun. But so, that could be anywhere from 18 to 25, depending on the amount of prep work and discovery.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
Um, I want to jump into the power of client retention and what are some of the tools you use to retain clients on an annual basis? Obviously, that's much easier business development than always having new clients.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done it's interesting. You said, "Hey, you can send this out for marketing information or, use," and it's just like, that's great. Yeah, you asked me to jump on this because happy to. Why not? Let's talk about it and love what you're doing. But I do virtually zero outbound, right? So, and I'm so lucky to have that. And I go back to, I think about how I got into this space is, initially not only Jim Warner, but a whole bunch of people who have been my mentors have vouched to me very, very early, right? So I was lucky enough to get into just a great circle early from, people like John Jury to Vince Corsaro, who always vouched for me, right? So I'm lucky to have that credibility, like coming right in as a, again, like at 26, 27, I had that credibility, which was cool. Of course, I had to follow up with it. But um, so one thing that Jim told me early on was, YPO is one of the strongest networks in the world, and believe it or not, very caring about one another. If you take care of the network of the people, and whether it's chapter, whether it's people calling you up and asking for favors or connections, give freely. Just give freely, and there will be this beautiful return. It will take care of you if you take care of it, kind of thing, right? And so my energy, even you see on this podcast, I'm an open book, right? From
Mm.
tool IP, right? I don't think I own anything. I'm just here trying to be a little bit of a vessel, right? Like I'm happy to help. If I can't, I'm sorry, I'll try my best. But if it's outside of my purview, I'm going to connect people. And I think ultimately the retention comes to do with trust, right? People, I mean, if you think about it, people don't know me a lot of the times. They trust me for a day or two. They don't trust anybody for a day or two, right? To block off their day for 2 days. I might stay in their house, right, while I'm there with them. I might meet their family, and they trust me with very confidential things. And so ultimately, my job is about trust. It's about creating safety, right? And so if I can do that consistently, I think we all know in this world that it's tough to find trustworthy relationships where when somebody says they're going to do something, they're going to execute on that. So ultimately, I think I hold that to a very high regard. I have a high level of excellence. And honestly, I think I have almost 100% like guarantee of I'm going to deliver what I say I'm going to deliver and what you want. And if I can't, then I'm going to say I can't do it. And I think, as you know, in this space in YPO, you kind of have to have that mentality. You can't say, "Oh, mess up 1 out of 5 times," right?
So we're kind of coming around the bend here to wrap up. What questions should I have asked you that I haven't asked you, and what do you want to share that we haven't had a chance to discuss?
Well, I guess the only other thing is it feels one-sided, right? Like I think it would be more so wanting to hear about your experience with Forum, why you're doing this. Even you know, how I can help you with what it is that what your endeavor is here, right? So listeners on this may already know, but ultimately, similar question you just asked, like, how can I best serve the community? I see you as part of that, and part of what I'm curious about is how I can best serve you here.
Well, I appreciate that. For me, I love facilitation. I have done it as a moderator. I find that often the moderators bear the burden of facilitation when there isn't one in the room, and there's maybe one in the room 1 out of 12 times, or so I find me not really getting the experience that I provide, and that's
Mm,
really hard to do to have it two way as a moderator. Um,
mm,
and I completely uh, agree with you on your experience because your peers think very highly of you, and every time I discuss facilitation, all of them say Adam is the go to guy. So
mm,
I think you've built a tremendous uh, track record, and which is why I wanted to have you on the pod. And
mm,
you can honestly just being here, and which I appreciate. This is about you, which is
mm,
why I do it. Um, and I just really believe in the magic that happens when
mhm,
small teams get together in a small room. I mean, that's where the magic happens. I always say the biggest things happen in the smallest room. So
mm,
I love seeing that magic that takes place. Um, so I'm grateful for your time and really appreciate you opening up the kimono and discussing some of the things that people often don't discuss.
Well, I think kind of what you just said, what I heard you say was that one, you want to make sure people get the experience of proper moderation or facilitation because it sounds like you try to deliver excellence as a moderator. And you want to make sure that both moderators are putting a lot of effort into forum, are getting what they want, getting what they need out of it, right? And it also sounds like you really believe in the magic of peer dynamics, right? And I guess if that was kind of a question to come back, um, one of the things I talk about is that this is a technology. A peer group is a technology, and it's one of the most
Mm,
ancient technologies. Um, if you read the book *Sapiens*, it talks about why did humans separate themselves from orangutans, let's say. And the number one theory is that we can sit around the fire and tell stories. We develop language to be able to basically pass on information through stories.
Actually, that's the story behind Assemble's logo, because I chose the orange color because it represents the fire. That brings out exactly what you're talking about.
Totally. So this isn't new, right? This is an ancient technology that our brains are built around, why we're social creatures. Um, one of the things that's cool about that book is it talks about that the only animal that's close to be able to tell stories, I think it said chimpanzee, and they can like lie and say there's a tiger over there and go steal a banana from you, right? And that's about it. That's the extent of a story. And therefore they cannot create culture. They can't create cultures, and that's why they have groups smaller than 150 at max, right? We have the ability, whether it's religion, whether it's philosophy, whether it's culture, we can build large organizations in large countries. And we do it through sitting around, sharing stories, building principles, building values and culture. And so, one, the culture of YPO, which is, the DNA of Forum, to be able to speak from experience and to ask questions and to hold confidentiality. I just believe as a human race, those are really strong principles that I think we could lose if we didn't have organizations like YPOs that remind us how important that is, right? So one, from like a human perspective, I think it's like really important work we're doing. But then on an individual basis is reconnecting to sitting around the fire with people who have similar values that we can trust. I would say 8 out of 10 people I meet in YPO say they do not have outside of their forum a trusted circle where they can be open and honest. Maybe more. I don't know. Right. Well, I can be trustworthy with my partner, but like she may not get everything about what it's like to, be in my world. I can't be open and honest with my investors, with my board, with my employees. Like, where else to go? My friends don't get it. Right. So there's something about that. And understanding that our brains do really, really well when we're navigating that together. That feels like just really good spiritual human work, if you will. And if we can help just a little bit of the world reconnect to that energy, I find that's important work. It sounds like you're doing the same thing. We're aligned there.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end. I really appreciate your time and for being here and sharing so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.